children with special needs are challenged by the changes that a new school year brings. EP's annual Back to School issue presents a helpful selection of resources, guidance, tips, and methods to ease the transition back to school. Read it today at www.epmagazine.com.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of Reach Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, Two Lives at Once. And with every wreath you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. Two Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, two lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
Suicide is preventable, and each of us has a role to play in suicide prevention.
Suicide is complex. There is no single cause.
And it's not always a mental health issue. It could be loss of a job or home, financial or relationship issues, pain, or leaving the military.
Suicide does not discriminate. It affects all ages, races, and genders, veterans or not.
If you know a veteran who is struggling, connect with them. Let them know help is available.
There is quick and easy access to services in times of crisis.
Dial 988, then press 1. Talking about it is okay.
Don't keep it inside. Don't be ashamed. Don't wait. Reach out.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis, Marine Corps veteran and your host. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hubazoo Network. You can find out more on hubazoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asack of Asack Real Estate, Army National Guard veteran Mark Holmes of Reapers Detailing and Power Washing, and my supporters, Cason Shaving Company and Exceptional Parent Magazine. We're fully into year 8. Yes, that's right, year 8 of Oscar Mike Radio, and it just keeps getting better and better the more I do it. And my next set of guests, with what they're doing, what they have experienced, really encapsulates the purpose and the mission behind Oscar Mike Radio. And this is a special one to me. I'm so glad to have these ladies with me. I'd like to introduce Susan Cleland, Sherye Greene, and Karen White from Mission Vigilant. We'll talk about all that to Oscar Mike Radio. Ladies, what a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You reached out to me about a very interesting, haunting story and a book about the story where Susan, your son, Michael, served in the Air Force and then took his life, became one of the 22, and you and Sherye wrote about it, and then you three worked with Karen to build the nonprofit Mission Vigilant. We'll talk about all that. And I very rarely get to talk to parents on this side of the aisle. Generally, it's wives or buddies who experience loss like this, but very rarely parents. And so as I'm reading your book, this really cut deep. But for people out there, Susan, if you, we'll start with you. If you just introduce yourself and kind of tell us who you are and then maybe a little bit about Michael, please.
I'm Susan Cleland. I am a wife and a mom of three and a grandmother. My name is Honey. And my son, Michael, is our oldest. When he decided to join the Air Force, he knew he wanted to be in the military since he was 9 years old and fly jets. That's what he wanted to do. So when he graduated high school, he had already been in ROTC his whole time in high school. He said, I really want to be in the Air Force. And I said, well, let's go talk to all of them, just see. And so he did end up joining the Air Force, loved it, just always talked about it was the best thing for him, but wouldn't really tell us much what was going on. So we just had to understand that he was doing things that we couldn't know about. And that was really hard as a mom because you want to know what your children are doing, but you want to be respectful. And then when he got out, it was not such a wonderful reason why he got out, but he knew he needed some changing. And anyway, he really loved working on helicopters, and that's what he ended up doing. So he wanted to continue that. And he went to school as a civilian to continue as a contractor for the military. But he kept saying, I do not want to go overseas anymore. I'm done with that. So I didn't think anything of it. And anyway, he did work with some companies, and we could just see some changes in him ever since he had gotten out of the service. I kept asking him to please go get some help and talk to someone, but he kept saying, Mom, I got this. So there's nothing you can do. People have to have their own choices and make their own decisions. And all I could do was pray. And I did a lot of that.
He's telling you this, you see the changes in him. Do you think he missed the Air Force? Because it sounded like in the books, I'm reading the book, that he really missed the military life. He missed working with people on the flight line. He missed that sense of accomplishment a lot more than he wanted to admit. And that's what really struck me in the book. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did. He would talk to his friends all the time that were all over the world. And it was like that was their family. And it was because he was gone for so many years and they were his family. We only got to see him a couple of times out of each year, even though we were talking all the time, but not being together. And so when you're not together with your own family, you make a new family in the military.
He joins the military and he comes home that first time. I'm always interested what parents and family members think when they see, you know, this kid go to boot camp and MOS school and come back for the first time. What was that like, Susan?
Oh, I could see a lot of change. He was holding himself up really tall and straight and proud of himself. And he couldn't stand the thought of people just not having the direct vision of what you're going to do. The play instead of I'm there for you anytime you need. Everything was scheduled. Like he couldn't deal with just I don't have anything to do. We got to have like a purpose. That was very important to him. And it was very crazy to see an 18-year-old doing that.
I chuckle because a lot of us are the same way. It's like, what do you mean? There's no schedule. There's no like line item detail what we're going to do. We're just going to sit there and do nothing. Like, what's up with that? So he's like us.
Right.
So, and it's some moms go from their sons not being able to fold their own socks to seeing this change. And it's very, very traumatic for them in a way.
Oh, I loved it. I thought it was wonderful. because here you have this child that's just like whatever, floundering around, and then you see them be such a grown up and so mature. And I constantly bragged about him, constantly.
He gets out. In the book, you describe all this, and he gets out and he's trying to make it in the civilian world. And the change is from where he was to where he was at struggling. How is that for a parent? Because I think about it, you don't really hear parents talking about their adult children's struggles a whole lot because they're not there. It's not like they are when they're, 0 to 3 years old in diapers or whatever. It's different, right?
Right. It was really different because you can't help them. They have to figure out what is their vision. You can give suggestions, but they have to really look within themselves.
And throughout this whole time, you still are his mom. You still, remember him from, childhood to now. I don't want to delve too much into his passing, if you will, in this form, but he passed and you had to deal with all that. I didn't realize how powerless a parent could be when their adult child passed. And you're truly at the mercy of local law enforcement and other entities to get that closure. Kind of describe that for us, please, because it really came across in the book as that the pain of that was almost as worse as the pain of losing him.
Absolutely. I was ready to go because it was another state. And my husband said, "No, we're not ready. We need to wait a little bit and then we'll go and make that trip," because I needed closure. I needed to know what exactly his last days were like. And of course, I wanted to meet all the people he worked with and what it was like living there, all of it. That was so healing, even though it was hard. And I'm thankful I was able to do that because a lot of parents, financially, emotionally, physically, they cannot do it. But I was able to.
Sherye, I want to, pivot this over to you for a couple of minutes. How did you and Susan meet? And did you see and hear all the same things I heard when I read the book from Susan herself before you guys started writing the project?
Right, I did. Susan and I have been very good friends for a very long time. I was one of her clients in her salon, and I knew Michael. And I think maybe the time we met, I was not writing, or I mean, I was writing, but I had not really been published, especially in book form at that time. But we just kept up with each other and would see each other. But after Michael died, she came to me I believe it was that next summer, and we had breakfast one morning and just talked about the possibility of doing this. I had written a World War II survivor memoir that had come out earlier. Actually, it came out in late 2020. For a remarkable lady that's still living in Kansas, Mildred Schindler Jansen. But I'd had some experience with writing, but Susan and I decided to embark on this together. And probably the first year, it took I think about 2 years to get the book put together. And Susan and I both, I think one of the sweetest things about the journey of writing this book is that we're both sisters in Christ, and we're both believers in him. And so we see life through that same lens. And that touched me, Travis, that moved you when you read the book, that was obvious. And, we've talked to a lot of different people throughout the release of this book, and we're certainly, faith in the Lord or the direction of your life, that's an individual thing. Every man and woman on the planet has to make that decision. But for us, we have found Jesus to be the truth, the way, and the life. And so anyway, that was so important to tell the story that way. Susan has a very committed prayer life and journals. And so that was one of the first things that she gave to me. I want to say maybe in 21 that she gave me those journals, and I made photocopies. They were in her handwriting, so then I had to transcribe them and then put them together. And then I think the other part of that was that helped me, I think, more than anything, be able to sort of get into her heart, because again, I was writing as her. I had written the World War II memoir the same way in Mildred's voice, but that's very difficult to try to put yourself in somebody else's skin. The other thing, I think, two other things I think that helped. One was that Susan is a part of a grief group in her area called Too Soon. And a lot of those mothers were so very kind to answer. We devised a questionnaire and they were able to give us information. Now, not all those children had been lost to suicide. Some had been to cancer or a car wreck or maybe a drug overdose. And I've never been there. I have two children, and I've never walked in those shoes. But trying to understand best as I could the heart and soul, the broken heart and soul of a mother who had lost a child, those other voices helped me gain more insight into what Susan and her husband Eric had gone into. And then the third thing that really helped was some technical help that I received from, one was Erskine Alvis, who is a friend who is a retired now Marine chaplain, and he has a wonderful standalone piece you may remember in the resource section in the back of the book. But someone who had certainly been on the front lines with active duty military and himself having lived that way, and having dealt with suicide. But I also found a wonderful book one day in a used bookstore about suicidology that was written by Dr. Edwin Schneidman, who's now deceased, but clinically he is sort of known in psychological circles as the father of suicidology, sort of the study of this manner of death. But getting his work was just so insightful to me. That's sort of the second part of the book where we talk about sort of the phenomenon of suicide itself, that mindset, not again trying to lead people down that path, but to best we could wrap our heads around, how do you go to that place in your mind? So that was very helpful. And then there were several clinical psychologists and ministers that were also part of that technical help that I felt like helped me. We did a lot of research also with the Department of Veteran Affairs and all those statistics that are maintained regarding the U.S. military and all the branches. And that just helped. We wanted to give as complete a look at this as possible. We wanted it to be told as Michael's story, but it's also the story of so many men and women that are in the service. And so, and then also that resource section that's in the back of the book, that was Susan's heart, was to, certainly share her heartbreak, but to help others stand up straight and tall. That's the thing that amazes me about Susan, as I have told her many, many times, you could have just stayed in the bed, or you could have just sat in the corner and nobody would have ever known this. But she has been so brave and so strong and courageous. And I think that's a gift God has given to her. I don't know, Susan, if I could have done that. I have a son and a daughter, and my son Travis is in the Navy Reserve. And so the U.S. military is very special to me. My dad served in the Army. It was between the Korean War and Vietnam. In fact, I was born at Fort Knox, but I have a real, heart for the U.S. military, because I am a mother of a son who wears the uniform of my country. And I have also many dear friends who are in uniform now or have been. And so, and it's a problem. Every life has, I think, suffering is the universal thread, so to speak, that binds all humans on this planet together. And your suffering may be you stubbed your toe, and mine may be I got fired from my job, and Michael's were the struggles that he struggled with. It doesn't matter. If it's happening to you, it's kind of like the difference between minor and major surgery. If it's happening to you, it's major surgery. So, but that resource section, we hope, will also help lead people to counseling or to organizations in their area across the country. As this book, we hope will reach more and more people, that they can find help, because it is available.
Thank you so much. Karen, I just want to come to you. We'll come back to the nonprofit here in a second, but how did you get involved with Susan and Sherye?
I was actually Susan's counselor.
Oh, wow.
That's when I first was introduced to Susan. She came to see me. I think Susan, it was about a year after Michael died. And that's how I got to know her and got to know her story, and Michael's story as well. And I echo everything that Sherye just shared about Susan. She just really stood out to me, as the client counselor relationship goes. We have certain boundaries and things, and Susan, just the entire time, I worked with her in that capacity. Um, there was just something different about her. She came in and she was grieving tremendously, even a year later. And yet the entire time it was like she had this other focus and mission in her heart, to help others. And it was interesting when I read the book, I realized just how long she had had that vision. We started talking about it in some of her counseling sessions. But come to find out, that idea had been in her heart almost from the minute she found out Michael passed away, which is unusual for people, grieving. But as time progressed, Susan started sharing some of her and Eric's ideas about wanting to help other families that found themselves in similar situations, and also wanting to help service members and first responders, maybe before they got to the point where Michael did. And so, the vision started taking shape for this nonprofit that they wanted to start. And she asked me one day if I wanted to she wanted me to be involved. She asked me to join the board. And of course, I wanted to. And immediately, I had to remember my role as her therapist. So, kind of throughout this, process, I consulted with some other therapists, and decided to let Susan make the decision if she wanted me to continue as her therapist or become a board member. And we met one afternoon, I'll never forget it. And she looked at me and she said, "Karen, I think you've, really helped me as a therapist. And now I think you could help me more by serving on the board." So we made the decision. I was able to refer her to another therapist so she could continue with counseling. But that's how I became involved with Mission Vigilant. I have a background. I was a military family life counselor from 2008 to about 2015-16. So I had experience working with service members and their family members. So yeah, that's how I got involved.
Awesome. One thing that was clear from page 1 till the end of the book is the aspect of faith. And I've been involved with and talked to a lot of people who chair nonprofits, run veteran services organizations, do advocacy for veterans and people who work in the mental health space. And it's so rare that I actually get to talk with people who base their work, their mission, their purpose on faith, or faith is woven into what they do. And you can be cynical. I could be, but then I'm like, faith is woven into this entire, not only Michael's narrative and Michael's story and his passing, but also into your transition into this advocacy space. I'd like to start with, Susan, and then move to Sherye and Karen, if applicable. Where does this faith come from? What is your relationship with God figure into your life? Because you look at stories in the Bible like Job and other stories where, people suffer, tremendous damage to their lives, but still believe in God. It's different to see somebody actually going through, if you get my meaning.
I wouldn't be standing if I didn't have him.
Yeah.
I mean, I have so many moms that I'm in this group with around the United States, mothers that have lost their children to veteran suicide. And so many of them don't even know about faith and how strong it can be. Some of them are so angry, they will never believe God again. Some of them just don't want to move. I can't, I have more people that love me. And I try to remind myself that every single thing we're given, it's a gift. It's not for us to keep. Nothing. Nothing is for us to keep. Our children, they're gifts. We're given them, but they're taken away. Our spouses, everyone. Same with material. Material is just not important to me. And so I just kept saying my joy was completely gone. Like I felt like there was a hole in my heart and I wanted that back. So it's a lot of work, a lot of dirty, dirty work. But you have to do it. If you're not willing to do the hard work, you will never get the pretty, beautiful, wonderful joy that's out there because it's there. And so every day, that's the first thing I have to do is, I just constantly give the glory to Him. And He has put me where I am. And so I want to give it to other people because it's wonderful.
Before we move to Sherye, I got to tell you, I like the fact that you'd have a passage in the book, and then there's a Bible verse that stood out to you, that you put in the book that kind of supported the point you were trying to make, or how you overcame an obstacle or challenge. The Bible still is relevant all these years later, and I really like that. And Christians get a lot of hate, derision, and made to feel like we're less than because we are Christ's children. But in that moment, as I'm reading this, I'm like, this is why we need the Bible. This is why we need God, because it supported everything you were doing. I just want to say that because it really stood out to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sherye, what about your faith? How and because of your faith, you two came together. Where does your faith come from?
Well, I came to know the Lord about a month before my 14th birthday. In fact, I am 51 years old in Christ. And so, and I came from a home where my parents took us to church. My mother read Bible stories to my brother and me at night. I had loving parents. I had a nice little cushy life, but I came to realize that that was not enough. And that none of that, that I may have had sort of the world by the tail, so to speak, but I had nothing because I did not have the Lord in my heart. And so, it wasn't an immediate, like transformational change. I've had times when I wondered that my testimony, it wasn't something traumatic or, and some people's are, but I'm very thankful that I heard that gentle whisper of His loving voice in my ear all those years ago. And I would say probably Susan I would say all of us maybe would say the same thing, but you go through seasons in life when there have been times when I've not necessarily wandered away from the Lord, but when I've not stayed as close by His side as I should have. But I think writing has been, first, I do believe that is a gift He has given me that I want to use to His glory and to the best of my ability. It's something that's brought me great joy just to be able to sit down, and especially to come alongside people like Susan and Mildred, the lady that was the World War II survivor, but to share, but also just to encourage people, and Susan the same way with her story, that we may never meet, that will pick up her book in a bookstore, to help them understand, I personally, and this is based on my faith, but I don't believe there's a person on the planet that's big enough to strap life on. We're just not made that way.
Yeah.
I think it was the French philosopher Blaise Pascal that, said there's a hole in every heart. I'm paraphrasing, but really, a God-shaped hole that only he can fill. And so that, I think, was one of the major premises of the book that we just both felt so strongly about. And also, God tells us in his word that his word is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword.
That's right.
And it can convict us and it can encourage us. It's supposed to be the bread in our mouth, almost like the food in our refrigerator. And I think, as I've grown in my faith, but especially as a writer, that part of being able to help other people open their eyes. And even, and my hope also is I realize there'll be a lot of people that will pick up this book and other books that I have written that don't know the Lord. And again, that's between him and them. That's not my responsibility. But I hope there would be enough of the fragrance of Christ in the words that I use that would make people curious, might prick the ears of their heart or their spirit, and make them want to know more. And that also too, for Susan, Michael was a believer. And so especially for her, after losing him, to know that she knows that she knows that he is safe in heaven and where he is. And I realized that that was something Susan and I talked about before we wrote this book, that there will be parents that don't have that peace. Or maybe their child, maybe they're not a believer, or maybe they know their adult child or their teenage child was not. All I know is we have a loving God, and if you come to him, he will talk to you. I think he still talks to us like he did Moses and Abraham. We just live in a really noisy world.
Yeah.
And you have to get very quiet, but he does still speak. And so we just it was our pleasure and our honor for him to tell this story, because he was the one that got Susan and her family, and still continues to get them through every day.
Karen, you practice in a clinical format and setting, and I don't want to assume anything, but do you have a faith-based component in your personal life? Or if you don't, how did you balance your clinician mindset with Susan and Sherye's faith-based approach to life and healing?
Yes, I do. I do share in the same faith as Susan and Sherye. Have a similar story as Sherye's. Actually came to know Christ at a fairly young age. My grandfather was a Methodist minister, and he and my grandmother were very instrumental in my life and in the growing of my faith. He was also a World War II veteran, and passed away just a couple of years ago at 96. But so yes, that's an interesting question, because I see all different kinds of clients, in and out of my door. Some are Christians and some are not. And with Susan, it was apparent from the beginning that she was a strong believer. And the particular situation that she's been in, it's one of those where there are a lot of questions for God, a lot of questions that you may never really get answers to. And again, the thing that stood out to me about Susan was that she had that unwavering faith and hope in God. And she, even at the beginning, with all the unanswered questions, she knew that everything was going to be okay. I remember in some of our sessions when we started talking about how you can feel the pain of grief and the anger and the sadness and all of those things, and joy and hope. And I think for Susan and other people like her who have that strong faith in Christ, that's where that's coming from. And I've seen a lot of people who don't have that, and their stories aren't as, they just don't have that faith and that hope. And don't get me wrong, Susan, we cried. I was in tears sometimes and during our conversations. There was anger and tears and all of the things, but that faith and the hope that she has in Christ, I believe, is what helped keep her so strong. And even through her tears, there were times when she was like, how can I help other people? I don't want to be the person that gets stuck in the bed. You know, like Sherye said, she could have just stayed in the bed and
Yeah.
everybody would have thought that was totally normal and acceptable under the circumstances. But she never wanted to do that. And she kept coming back, and every session we ended with hope or looking forward to something in the future, or how can I use this to help other people, which is just amazing.
One of the things in the book, as I talked to you all and came to mind, especially that I want to talk about, is it wasn't just you, Susan, going through this. And then as you went through your grief, went through your pain, it wasn't just you going through that. You got other people, and other people helped you. Your husband was a great source of support. Your other children were a great source of support. The community, your church, people you met along the way. And then to end that, it's there's an entire section of places I can go for suicide assisted, help and advocacy that, like, I know the VA has a SAVES program, Psych Armor has classes and resources, but this is one of the first times I've read a book where you have a true section for resources that you can contact for understanding how to deal with suicide or how to understand suicidal ideations. Talk to me, all three of you, about the aspect that, kind of like we say in the military, no one fights alone. Susan, you didn't do this alone. How important was that to you all?
It's so important because when you think you're by yourself, when you're struggling, you think no one else has had your same story. And really, it may not be exactly the same, but there's parts of it that are. And you can't keep that bottled up if you want to heal. Because if you keep reminiscing that over and over and over in your head, it's like the rat on the wheel, and you're not going to come to a conclusion. So, to get the conclusions, you have to have someone tell you, okay, this might help, this might help, this might, because every person is different in what they need. And it's great to hear from different people. Well, that didn't help me, but this helped me.
So
So,
one of the things, in all seriousness, one of the things was a military guy myself, and when I didn't like asking for help.
of course, no, none of y'all do.
And then taking the medicine when I finally asked for help was really hard.
Yes, look what I went through. It's really hard. But guess
Yeah.
what? It's so much better.
Yeah,
So
you're
much
right.
better.
You're
Aren't you
right.
glad that you asked for help?
As much as it pains me to admit it, yeah, it was. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. And that's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, as you're watching this and hearing, this mother and, her two close friends, I'm going to use close friends, you can't do it by yourself. You can't do it alone. And man, that comes out so plainly in what you're writing about. And it was so key for you moving forward. I got to ask, Sherye, was that a purposeful intent for the book when you sat down with Susan? Did you really want her to flesh that out? Because it could have been glossed over. It could have been a very
Yes,
different way for that.
it was. And I think also because of my own experience as a mother of someone of a son in uniform, and friends that I've known and research that I've done, um, I think males are, I mean, I know males are wired very differently than females, but I think it is probably harder for men sometimes to ask for help. One of the most intriguing things I learned about suicidal ideation is that component of shame. And one of the, I think, most life-changing things that I learned while doing the research for the book is the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, I messed up. Shame says, I am a mess up, that I am worthless. And and also counseling has been a part of my own life journey. And I know the value of how much it has meant to me personally, and that, on several issues in my own life, aside from this book, that I feel like I'm pretty well sane. I wonder some days, but I wouldn't have that insight. One of my favorite verses we used in the book was Psalm 27. I think it's 13. It said, I would have despaired unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of God in the land of the living. And I think I have had some dark places. I don't know would I have ever taken my life, but I have had several very low points in my life where I thought a lot about that and what would life be like were I not here. And so, but my idea of, or trying to figure out how do you go to that place in your mind is, I think of suicide as you wake up in the night, you get out of your bed, and you're trying to go to the bathroom, but instead you get into the closet and it's dark and you can't see, almost like a big walk-in closet. And if you can't find your way back to that doorway, or if you can't find the light switch and you stay in there, then that's when things go south. But yes, and that, if I could say anything to readers, and especially to men, or to me, it doesn't matter your gender, that is the mark of a strong human being. When you say, uncle, basically, when you say, I can't do this on my own, because none of us can, but the help is available. The help is available.
So, Karen, just not to make this about myself, but I do kind of want to, I relate to this as because I'm a guy. I've been through my own, pain and suffering. For me, I got comfortable being in pain. I got to know it very, very well. And it was scary coming out of pain. Does that make any sense? And asking for help means that I was going to let something go that I knew into a lot of unknowns. And the only reason I bring this up is that a lot of my buddies and I feel the same way. Like, we know what this is. We know it's going to suck. So there's no point in trying to change it because it might be worse. Your book, though, Susan, takes you through that aspect in a really interesting way to where, yes, it was hard. Yes, it was difficult. Yes, there were a lot of unknowns. But to your earlier point, once you got through it, you were able to serve well. So just really quickly, Karen, why is it that, I don't know how women do this because I know we're wired differently, but why is it that a lot of us guys kind of like being in our pain?
Well, I think you hit it. You get comfortable in it. And sometimes the unknown is scarier than what you know. And in that place, what you know is the pain, the hurt, the anger, the depression, whatever it is that you're going through, the trauma that you've experienced or whatever. And so, like you were saying, coming out of that more into the light, so to speak, is really scary. And I think that fear of exposing whatever it is, or maybe uncovering something that you've kind of pushed away, is really hard and scary for a lot of people. And I mean, as a therapist, when I meet with people in their first session, I tell them a lot of times, you've done the hardest part. You've come in the door, you know. And it's funny to see people's reactions, like, yeah, I can't believe I actually followed through with the appointment, but like Susan and Sherye and you have all shared, once you reach out, it's like this huge weight just falls off. And Sherye mentioned shame. I've worked with so many people, but military people in particular, who there's like this block of remembering or admitting or looking at things that have happened in their past or that they've done in their past, and bringing that to light. But especially as a therapist, we're objective. There's no judgment. Once you find yourself in a counselor's office, you're in a completely safe place. There's no judgment. I don't look at you and say that was right, that was wrong, or anything like that. We're here to just help you heal. And to your point of, being connected, we cannot heal in isolation.
No.
I think I think we were created for connection, and we've got to have other people in our lives to help us through those dark times. And for family members, sometimes it's hard. Susan mentioned this earlier. They ask Michael questions. They try to have conversations because they could see some things. But it's not always welcome. Like you were saying, it was really hard. Michael told Susan, Mom, I've got this. And so many people, especially military people, I think, are programmed like, I can deal with this. I can take care of it myself. Yet there's this point where we need to learn, like, it's okay to ask for and accept help from other people, especially people who love me and care about me.
The book is Mission Vigilant, co-written by Susan Cleland and Sherye Greene. Here with me, I'm also here with Karen White. Read the book, had a profound effect on me, and it will on you as well. You go through the pain and suffering. You do the self-discovery and healing. You get as we say, a tribe behind you, and then you create a nonprofit to further this along. Susan, what's that been like? Taking everything that you've experienced, and then, in my view, wouldn't it be easier just get in your proverbial turtle shell and just enclose yourself and put up the wall? But instead, there's no wall there. There's no perimeter there. You're going out to, be there for other people. How's that worked for you? What's that been like?
It's been great. I love people being able to come up to me saying, I'll always tell my story. And so when they hear my story, someone or lots come up to me and tell me either they experienced something, a friend or someone, and they want to tell me their story. And of course, you want to hear it because it's important to them. But to know that they know now there's a resource to have help for themselves or others, that makes them feel so good to know someone cares that much. So it's worth it. I don't care how hard it is for me, it's worth it.
It's been worth it. Karen, you're involved in the nonprofit. Certainly wasn't probably on your career list of things to do, but still it has, in a way, rounded out, a clinical and personal, study. What's it like seeing this work continue even past this terrible event that happened?
It's been amazing. I'm so grateful that Susan wanted me to be involved. And, those of us on the board, we all have different backgrounds and different ways, I think, that we contribute to the organization. But just being able to see and hear about you, we don't always get to meet the people that we're helping, but to know that we're providing free counseling for military members, for their family members, for first responders, and to hear the stories of how that is helping people. It's just amazing. And I think Susan's efforts to share about the organization, to get out there and raise money, so she's able to provide these resources to people. It really does, like you were saying, it's like a full circle thing. Like this is a really good example of how someone has turned like their worst nightmare into a truly amazing and life-giving thing for other people. And like she said, I can't imagine having, to tell that story over and over again. But as hard as that is, she continues to do it. She and her whole family, because they see the results. They see how they're helping other people. And to watch that, it's pretty awesome.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, the irony is, Michael was lost to us, but because of his loss, how many lives have been saved throughout all this? It's got to be, Susan, as a mother, really different to have another mother or father come up to you and embrace you and say, he helped us out in that way, or even the person that was thinking about ending their life. I can't even imagine what that must be like for you.
Feels great.
Sherye, as you're chronicling all this, is there an idea to kind of tell not so much a part two, but tell the story of what the nonprofit and the mission is in certain ways with people, or is just going to be it for now?
We have, Susan and I've kind of talked about that. I don't think in any really concrete terms. And that might certainly be a project later. I think when we do appearances together or like podcasts that like we're doing today is a wonderful way to tell the story. But thinking back as I've been listening to us talk today, so many of another part of my research was to get in touch with some of Michael's friends. And a lot of that was done through really email correspondence, just because lives are so busy. But, and also I had the transcript, I made a written transcript rather of Michael's memorial service, his celebration of life service. And two of the young men that spoke just talked about everybody to the man or the woman that I knew that was Michael's friend, what a helper he was, what a supporter, what an encourager, that he was the one in their life that stood behind them and said, you can do this, you're not going to quit. And so it's very, I mean, it's certainly bittersweet that he is not here, but I think it's a wonderful way to honor Michael's life, that he was a man of integrity and he was a man of honor. And, there are just some of us at the bears of this life. Just we can't figure out a way to get them off our shoulder. Doesn't diminish who we are, doesn't make us less than. But I think his story is a wonderful way that will continue. But that was a constant theme I heard from those his friends and those he had served with, was what an encourager. And he was the one that was kind of taking care of everybody else. And so in turn, his story is doing that in the lives of many, many others.
We're kind of winding this down. It's amazing how fast time flies. Couple of things. Where can people get this book?
Amazon.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any bookstore?
We're not in Barnes and Noble, but you
Oh,
can
okay.
also look us up on missionvigilant.org, and you can get a signed copy from Sherye and I.
Missionvigilant.org. I will have that link in the Oscar Mike Radio show posts along with the Amazon link to this book. Nonprofits don't run in a vacuum. I'm very familiar with that. How can people help you all with your mission to provide these counseling services to people in need?
Keep sharing about us. We have PayPal and Venmo, and just please keep telling people, because unfortunately you do have to have money to make things go around. We have two really large events. We have a golf tournament every year, and we have a ruck 22 buddy check that comes up in September. It's always the third Saturday in September. So that's our big family day, and we do a big event for that day to raise money.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Again, this kind of conversation, this kind of story, ladies, is exactly why Oscar Mike Radio was created. And I just turned 8, but I get asked, why do you still keep doing it? What else is there to talk about? And this conversation brings all that together. And as a parent, I've got 3 sons. Like you, sure, I've never walked down this road, but as a parent, I certainly empathize with everything that you're going through, Susan, and just admire your courage and your perseverance and your trust in God to lead you through this time. And I want to thank all of you for sharing with me so candidly and openly. I'm truly humbled right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, the book is Mission Vigilant. This has just been a fantastic conversation. I've learned a whole lot. The book really lays out, again, Michael's story, and then the idea of recovery, perseverance, and healing, and then resources that you as a person, parent especially, can go to get, assistance dealing with this epidemic of suicide. I'm humbled, I'm honored right now, but Lays, you're welcome back anytime to talk about anything you want. I look forward to it. And so we're going to close this down now, and I'm going to say we're mission in flight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember, Honor teaches our mission. We care about it, and we do it every day. But I think there are things that just hit you and give you a reason to go on. The theme for our 2024 for Reach Across America is Live with Purpose. It just seemed to fit in with the vows of the REAP, the 10 attributes that we feel represent our United States military. I thought, what a great opportunity to put those 2 things together and show our kids through how we act some of the things that can make their lives better, their communities better, and by doing that, the country better. For me, Live with Purpose, I think, it's a mindset. Set some guidelines and then go out and purposefully make life different, make a change. It's an opportunity to set an example.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load Co-Sinister One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.